Hey everyone, it's Stephanie Leffler with Mom University, and I am here today to talk specifically with stepmoms through an interview that is very timely for my area where I live, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway, I wanted to introduce someone, Diane McDowell. Hi, Diane.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
So Diane looks so cute. She lives in the country and she's on her sun porch and I'm in my red room, as you can see. So anyway, so I met Diane it was like June at a conference, and guys, this is like what I do. I don't know a lot of people in the fields that I am bringing out to you. Like, we're talking about mental health today, right? And I'm a nurse, but mental health in nursing is so confidential, right, Diane?
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. Like, patients in the hospital, everything's confidential. You're under HIPAA and all that stuff. But like the psychiatric area, that is totally confidential and locked up in a safe for good reasons that we can touch on later if we get to that. But anyway, so I don't know a lot of people in this area. And we were at this conference and she stood up and introduced herself. And right away I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to her. So we got to talking, and she told me what she did. And I said, can I please interview you? Because I need you, and I know the stepmoms I talk to need you, and a lot of people, not just stepmoms. But so we got to talking, and she said, sure, I'd love to, and here we are today. I'm so excited because she is going to talk to us specifically about mental health. And as stepmoms, mental health issues can be with your husband, with your kids, with your stepkids, with yourself, as in my case. So there's a lot of research out there about stepmoms and why stepmoms get depressed or have issues, start developing issues with depression or even suicidal thoughts. But there's not a lot out there on stepmoms who have depression or a mental illness prior to marrying and becoming a stepmom. To introduce Diane now, and I'm going to read a little bit about you, if that's okay, Diane. You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Diane is a coach, speaker, and she's been a mental health therapist for 18 years. She's passionate about helping people live authentically. And for education and fun, she listens to TED Talks and podcasts on health, wellness, spirituality, and simple living. And that just makes me laugh because I'm a podcast freak too. So I love it when I meet other podcast freaks. And stepmoms, if you haven't looked at podcasts, please look at your smartphone. There's an app for podcasts. You'll be amazed when you download that app and you look at what kind of podcasts you can listen to. It's crazy. You'll never listen to the radio again. But anyway, Diane is a home manager. She's passionate about managing her home, not allowing her home to manage her. They have a family mission, which is very interesting, with house rules, and it's posted in their dining room. And their guiding principles. Their family mission statement is work hard, play hard. They take it very seriously, and they love to go on mission trips, boat, travel, camp, dance, sing, and in general act pretty silly. She's been married for 15 years, and she has 2 children, a girl, age 9, and a little boy, age 6. Her daughter has Down syndrome, and she has taught Diane more about herself than anyone else, she said. Her son also deals with anxiety and has made Diane kind of reach out of her comfort zone to help him live his life more fully. She came from Pennsylvania, which is cool. I've never been there, never been out that way. I'm an Indiana girl. She was homeschooled until the age of 14, and then she went to the public academic system, and she was not able to read or do the work of a 7th grader. So at that point, she was diagnosed with dyslexia, and she not only received schooling accommodations through the 12th grade, but also during her master's programs and in social work and business. And I wanted to say that she has 2 master's degrees. and she has dyslexia. And she said that she could not read when she went to 7th grade. So, Diane, you've kind of overcome some obstacles, haven't you?
Yes, yes. A lot of hard work and what they call grit. So.
Yeah, well, when I heard her whole story, I'm like, okay, I've got to interview you. So the other reason why I wanted to interview her is because I've gone through depression myself. It's a family thing. Mental health is not just depression, obviously. There's lots of different diagnoses that are under that umbrella of mental illness. I specifically am doing a series on depression, but that does not mean that you can't relate a lot of what we talk about to other mental health illnesses. And so we're just going to start off and we're going to see where it goes. But I'm just excited to pick her brain and find out more about how stepmoms can deal with this stuff, and if I'm doing things right, not doing things right, and what I can do to improve. So the Facebook live series I've started is called Deceiving Depression. And I told you I decided to do that because I've been depressed since high school, and I've been on something since high school. I shouldn't say I've been depressed. I've had depression. I have a very happy life. But so one of my first questions for you, Diane, is do you have any advice for stepmoms as far as preparing for possibilities of their depression becoming worse, who are thinking about marrying a man with kids? So like me, who I was diagnosed in high school, and then I started dating my husband, and he has children. So I know if I end up with this man, if I marry this man, I'm going to become a stepmom. And I know that there are challenges with that. Is there anything that you would suggest that stepmoms prepare for so that they can be proactive in their mental health and taking care of themselves?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I thought of that are just so important are making sure you have a really good support system, making sure you have people that you can turn to when you're overwhelmed and you don't know what you're doing. So prior to getting married, you'll want to make sure you establish a good support system. And in that support system, you'll want to let them know kind of what you're needing when you call them and you're frustrated or overwhelmed. Sometimes we just need someone to listen. Sometimes we want advice. Sometimes we want just reassurance that I'm going to be a good parent and I can do this. So you want to let people know what you're looking for, because sometimes as friends we give advice and maybe the person didn't want advice. Helpful, but we're not. So one of the things is making sure you have a good support system. Another thing is know your own triggers. Know yourself, know what's going to set you off or trigger you, and then start working on those issues. Like if you know that, for example, me, rejection is one of my triggers. I get insecure when I feel like I'm being rejected. So I have to be very aware of when I start feeling, is this reality, and checking it out. Is this going, is this my perception because I'm afraid of it? Is it reality? And then what do I need to do with it? Learning how to be okay and sit with it, instead of what can happen for me is when I feel rejected, I can go into shame. And if anyone who's experienced shame, which we all have, which just washes over us, and it's this heat, and everybody experiences, when I feel rejected, I go into this mode of shame. And shame means I keep it silent and I don't talk about it. And so I have to make sure whenever I go into that place that I share with people, that I don't go and hide it in secrecy and go into my shell. So if you know what your triggers are, then you can start stepping out of that and changing it. If you're not aware of it, you can't change it very well. So it's really important to make sure you know yourself and you know your triggers, so that if a stepchild or your husband-to-be or your husband makes a comment and you know, okay, that's my trigger, that's when I need to start doing self-care.
Okay.
Really important is this self-care or self-compassion. If I don't know how to take care of myself, then I am probably going to lash out at other people when I feel threatened or overwhelmed or like I'm insecure in some way. So as soon as I start noticing that my depression is increasing, or I'm dealing with emotions I don't know really what to do with, I need to do self-care, self-kindness, compassion, call in my support system, talk to myself kindly, those kind of things. I would also say knowing when medication go, and everybody's different, but kind of having a line that you've drawn that says, when I notice these are the symptoms, then I need to get on meds. And meds aren't for everybody, but they definitely can be very helpful. And the thing that I see a lot is people come in and they want something now to get them feeling better, but it usually takes 4 to 6 weeks for antidepressants to really start becoming effective. So you need to know where your line is to say, okay, I notice I'm starting to, what we call in mental health world, decompensate, not do as well, so that I can get on meds now, out of bed and function. So you really want to know your symptoms, your signs to say, okay, I'm starting to not function well, so I need to do something now before I can't function.
Okay. And something interesting about that is sometimes I am not able to figure that out. I generally stay on my medications all the time, but there's been a couple times where I'm like, I don't need these, I don't want to take medicine, so I stopped taking them. And I don't necessarily notice anything, but my mom will call me and we'll have a conversation about just normal conversation. And she'll say, "You're not taking your medicine, are you?" And I'm like, gosh, darn it, Mom. Like, how do you know? So she's my support system. And that's what I need from her. Like, I need her to tell me I can tell, because sometimes I can't.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that you'll want to let your support system know too, is if you see that I'm not doing well, I need you to call me out and tell me that. Because sometimes we don't realize the changes that are happening in us, especially if we're not in a good place. Right. So we need our support system to say, hey, your behavior's changing, you're really irritable, something's going on with you.
Right. Now, the difference between that and someone almost using the fact that you're on medication against you. So my family has tried a couple times to say, did you take your medicine today? And I'm telling you, that can be one of the worst things that you say to someone on medication for depression. Mm-hmm. So when, obviously you should probably talk to your future spouse about the fact that you are either on medication or you have a history of depression or a mental illness, don't you think, like before you get married?
I say yes, but I'm very much about, I mean, if you have depression, you're marrying someone, that's going to be your support system. They need to know what to look for and how to help you and how to support you. So I think it should be even a longer conversation than I take an antidepressant. It needs to be a conversation of, sometimes I deal with depression. This is what has happened. This is what it can look like. This is how you can support me in it. Like, it kind of needs to be an ongoing, open discussion about, if I'm not doing well, I need you to check in with me and let me know that if you see changes and you're concerned about it, so that understands kind of what's good to expect. And not only that, so that they can be there for you, so they can be your support through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know about, talking to the stepkids and the in-laws and all that about it. It is a very private thing. But for me, my husband is a huge support for me. And so it was very important that he know, what my history was, and I was on medication and the importance of it. And if we went on vacation and I forgot it, that's, a huge deal. And there was one time we did go on vacation. I forgot my medicine. So he called the CVS and made sure they had it and made sure I got it. And because he knew the importance of me taking it and not missing it. So I would just personally suggest that you have that conversation. I talk about in an earlier Facebook Live video in high school, when my boyfriend found out I was on medication, he did not understand it. He wasn't nice about it, really. And he said, I don't understand. What do you have to not be happy about? Well, it ended up ending the relationship because I had to choose myself over that, and some people, they're just not going to get it. Like, they don't understand it. They don't want to understand it. And that's okay, because you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Go
You
ahead.
need to check out, before you share with somebody about being on medicine, you need to make sure it's a safe person. You don't want to just tell anybody, because those people could, that information is getting more and more common, so it's not as, but it could be hurtful. It could be used to hurt you. So you want to make sure anyone you tell is someone who's a safe person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Which I just have put it out all over Facebook. That's my decision. So, but I do see, sometimes employers or other family members, that kind of thing, it can cause issues. So you do want to be really careful with that. And the people that you do talk to about that, you want to make sure that they know that it's your private information and not to share that. So, okay. So one of the biggest questions I've been asked by other stepmoms that I talk to, and why I'm so excited to talk to you is, as a stepmom, what do they need to know about mental health issues if they've not been around that before, in children specifically, and especially when their stepchild has been diagnosed with a mental illness, either prior to the marriage where they've become the stepmom or during that whole period. What kind of things do you suggest that they just know right off the bat about mental illness in children?
Okay, so the most common ones for kids is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADD, and now are really all under ADD, but attention deficit disorder. That's very common in younger children. And then there is bipolar, is pretty common right now. It used to be a lot of people were diagnosed with ADHD. A lot of people are now diagnosed with bipolar. And then there's depression and anxiety. Those are the general ones that kids are diagnosed with. The thing about depression, though, is that it looks different in kids than with adults. So when you're dealing with depression with adults, a lot of times people say, like, can't get out of bed, or sleeping all the time or not sleeping. So it looks different. In kids, it's a lot of anger. It's a lot of anger outbursts. It's just this discontent with life. It can show up in things like self-harming behavior, like cutting or burning themselves, or just very risky behavior that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past. What we look for a lot of times is sudden changes. If your child was a pretty much decent, as far as grades were good, not a lot of behavior problems, seemed pretty happy, and then all of a sudden you have a big change, we start looking for, is that depression? Is there something going on there? Anxiety is going to show up a lot younger and a lot differently than depression. So with depression, you're going to start seeing, a lot of times there'll be a sudden change. There's situational depression, which is because of a situation. So let's say there's a big event that happens in a family's life. That could cause situational depression with the kid. And what can happen is, after about 6 months of depression, your brain path actually starts changing. And so medications may be, if the kiddo has been depressed for 6 months or more, they may need medication to get out of that. And then what I usually tell the kids that I work with is, let's relook at it at 6 months, because a lot of the kids say, I don't want to go on meds, I don't want to stay on meds for the rest of my life. And so what I'll suggest is, let's try for 6 months and see how you're doing. And then we can look at it and see if you're ready to come off, or maybe even decrease it, titrate down a little, decrease it a little, and see where you're at that time. But situational depression can actually change your chemical pathways, your neurons in your brain, and actually depression. So even if the
last part, it can actually change the pathways and the neurons.
Yeah, your neuron pathways in your brain, it can actually change that after 6 months of dealing with depression. And so you may need meds to get out of that. So and it may not be something.
So is that like a permanent change?
It can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And that's where, what can happen is, that's why but oftentimes kids can get out of that. And it doesn't mean they have to stay on meds. So the pathways can change, but they can change back, and that's where meds can be very helpful.
Okay, because I know a lot of discussion that I've had with moms and dads is that they do not want medication. The last thing they want is medication. So they'll do acupuncture, they'll do all these other therapies. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but what's your thoughts on that? Like, medication is the last thing we're going to try, and we're going to try all of this other natural stuff before that. What do you think that's worth trying?
I do. I can't. That's a tough question, because yes, some of those things can work, or they may just come out of it naturally on their own at some point. But meds, I have seen meds do amazing things to kids. So I don't want to minimize what can happen with meds.
And probably a very individual basis too, I would assume.
Yes, and that's the thing with antidepressants anyway, is one may work wonderful on one person and not on another. And so they actually have the gene site testing, where you can take a swab of saliva and test and see which one that you metabolize best. So if you do look at doing meds, there's that option as well.
Okay. So the gist of this whole thing is there's lots of options. You just have to research them out and figure it out what's best for you guys. But as far as stepmoms, so, you know, biologically, the kids are not theirs, but they're trying to form a relationship with them. And mental illness, if they don't understand it, can be one of those things that maybe holds them back from developing more of a relationship than they could have had. So something that stepmoms need to realize is that in kids, depression can be anger and anger outbursts, and like a discontent with life, like you said. But one of the things that you are suggesting stepmoms look at is a change in their attitude, or a change in the way they react, or a change in their life. What kind of changes would you say they should be looking for, or if they notice?
So a big drop in grades, a big drop, like a sudden change in behavior. So if the kiddo was generally a happy-go-lucky kid, and all of a sudden they're not, and they're angry and they won't get out of bed, or they're fighting with you, and this is new behavior. Like if they've always had that issue, that's not necessarily going to indicate a mental health condition. It could be, but it's not necessarily. But what we look for is if you've all of a sudden had a change in your energy level, tired all the time, can't get out of bed, don't want to do things that you used to love to do, lack of interest in activities that you were once passionate about. If you see a sudden change in your child, we always say rule out medical first, because if there's a medical condition that can also cause those things, thyroid, things like that. You want to rule out medical first, and then we start looking at mental health. And then anxiety is very often in kids too, and like what anxiety looks like with adults, but there's also a lot of things that parents can do to really help with anxiety with kids. But we have to, and as stepmoms, it makes it really difficult, because you're not really a kid since birth, so you may not have noticed those symptoms right away. Mm-hmm. And then you're not really.
We have no rights.
And this is the way you could say it again.
We have no legal rights. I don't know if that's what you're getting to, but.
Yes, it's like you're expected to, it was, but I wasn't sure how to say it. You're expected to be the mom, but you don't have the authority to go into a doctor's office and say, this is what's going on with my child. So it puts you in a very difficult situation, because you can make notes and you can observe and you know what's happening, but you're not biologically or adoptively their legal guardian, so therefore you don't have as many rights as a regular parent. So one thing I would suggest is, if you are being a stepmom, you have a right to give a therapist or a doctor all the information you want. They can't tell you anything. I have plenty of people that I talk to, and what I say is, you can tell me whatever you want to, I just can't respond. I can't acknowledge that person's a patient, but you are welcome to call me and tell me whatever you want to.
Oh, really?
So what I also tell parents is talk to me in generalizations. I can't tell you about a specific person, but if you ask me about signs or symptoms, what would you think? Then I can talk. I just can't talk about your specific child without a release of information or data present.
Okay, that's good to know. Because as stepmoms, we don't, and I don't know if stepmoms realize this, but we don't have any legal rights. And stepmoms tell me all the time, well, I take my kids to the doctor, or the stepkids to the doctor, and I take them to the dentist. And I realize that you do that because I've done that. And they've never questioned me. They know I'm the stepmom, but they've never questioned me. That's on them. Because legally, you don't have a right to make medical decisions for them, and you don't have the right to sign consents and all that other stuff. Am I saying that hospitals, doctors, dentists, that they're going to question you and not allow you to do that? I don't know. It depends on the doctor. On their end, legally, they shouldn't be. But so the same as mental health, only as we were talking about before, mental health is kind of a whole different realm of confidentiality. And so it would probably be very difficult for a stepmom to take a child into a therapist and get treatment and stuff. I think that's what I would think. But as go ahead.
We do not allow any step parents to bring them into the initial appointment. The first appointment has to be the legal guardian. After that, step parents can bring them in. But yeah, the very first appointment has to be the legal guardian of either one.
Okay. So as stepmoms, we may be in the situations where the kids are showing these symptoms. And what we can do at that point is log them, and we can talk to our spouse and just say, this is what I'm noticing. These are the symptoms I'm noticing. I think that we need to get him or her seen. I think you need to talk to your ex about this and make a decision. But I just want stepmoms to realize that that's our job as a stepmom of the children, is to bring the attention to the children's mom and dad. And hopefully, they will take that seriously. Sometimes they won't, and you will just have to continue dealing with the symptoms. But that conversation needs to happen between you and the father and the ex-wife, or the mom, the bio mom. So obviously, Diane, there's fathers who don't want to seek treatment for their kids. Mm-hmm. And these stepmoms are at home a lot. And what we find, our stepmoms are with stepkids a lot. We're driving them places. We're helping them with homework. We're pretty much doing all the mom stuff. So what would you say if we have a stepchild who is suddenly becoming almost violent or having outbursts, and we don't know how to handle it? What do you do in that situation?
That is such a tough place, because again, but you're expected to take care of them as if it's your child. And so I worked in the youth day therapy program. It's a step down from hospitalization. And I worked with kids that had those kind of explosions frequently, meaning 3-4 times a week, if not more sometimes. And what we worked on with the people in the home is coming up with a plan. And the problem is you can't use the plan just when it happens in a crisis. You need to talk about it and have a plan in place. So what we did with our kids was we said, when you have these explosions, what do you need? Would say, I need my parent to leave me alone. I need some space. Okay? But your parent's also concerned about your safety, so they can't just leave you alone. So what we came up with was kind of a contract with the parent and the child. In this case, it could be step parent and then bio parent and child, of I want left alone for half an hour to calm down, to regroup, line of sight, because a lot of the kids I work with had a history or continued to self-harm in some way, cutting or burning or picking or whatever. So it would be a line of sight so that the parent knew they were safe and okay. And actually, some of the parents negotiated the time. They said a half an hour is too long. I need to resolve it before then. There are times you don't have time to do that, and I get that. But having something in place to say when things start to escalate, take a break, we're going to do line of sight, and then we're still going to come back. This doesn't mean you win this argument or whatever. We still have to come back to that issue and resolve it. But it gives everybody time to kind of quiet down, calm down, and come back and be able to talk about it. So talking to your stepchild about what is it that you need. It may not be those things. It may be that they need something else. So asking them what they need, and if they can't come up with it, it's kind of a trial and error, giving them suggestions. Do you think this would be helpful? Do you need to go run around the building once and to get some energy out? One of the things we used to do with some of the kids I worked with was actually push-ups, because they had like this frustrated energy in them that they couldn't contain anymore, and they needed to get out. So it's like either sitting and being quiet might help, or actually getting that energy out physically somehow, doing some push-ups or running for a minute to just kind of, when we get worked up, it gets all of our energy going and our blood flowing, and we need to somehow release that sometimes before we can get calmed down again. There's lots of breathing exercises and those things too, and so depending on your child, what works for them. For my kiddo who's got anxiety, we do breathing and meditation. We've done it for years, and he'll say, "Mommy, meditate to me." It's my 6-year-old, because he will start doing this. He can't handle it anymore, and he'll just start to get himself all worked up. So you have to figure out, what works for that child, and it may not work for the other child in the house. It just might work for one child. So it's talking to them about what, and then trying it and seeing it, does it help? And then talking about it later. Did that help, or was that not, if that didn't work, let's try a different way.
Okay. So in the case of outbursts, I know we've all kind of done this with our own children. I know with mine, when they have this little outburst, and I think, they're faking it, or I want to automatically ground them or take something away or start counting, 1, 2, 3. I was a counter. So in the situation where the child has anxiety or they have some kind of mental illness that's affecting them, and they have these outbursts, are they able to control them?
Not necessarily. So here's the thing is, if you have a mental health condition, I'm still responsible for my behavior. It doesn't change that I'm responsible for my behavior. I may need different accommodations to take care of myself, but I'm still responsible for my behavior. So they're still responsible to get themselves under control, or for what they do when they're out of control, the damage they cause or things they break or whatever. Here's the thing with my son who's got anxiety. I tell him things like, I'm telling myself a story right now that this is all because you didn't get what you wanted. So it's not me accusing him that you're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get what you wanted. It's me saying, the story I'm telling myself right now is that you're doing that. So tell me your story. Because what we can do is we can accuse, which escalates everybody up again. And so it's, whether they have control over it or not, in a way, doesn't matter, because we need to help them learn to get control over it, whether it's mental health related or not.
Okay, that's awesome. It just doesn't matter because it's happening, right? It's happening. So
we need to deal with what's happening, whether they have control or not. We need to help them figure out how to get control.
Okay. So my daughter's a soccer player. The other one is a cheerleader. Very strong. They're very strong girls. They could probably beat the crap out of me. Honestly, I wouldn't want to tell them that. But so if they start escalating to the point where I couldn't control them, because I know that, that happens. What do you do in that situation? Like, what if you're scared for yourself or the other kids?
So I work in a crisis unit now, and we get that kind of call all the time, and we tell people to call the police. A lot of parents say, I don't want to get the police involved. And I understand that, but you can't allow somebody to harm you or the other kids. So if it gets to that point, hopefully this isn't new behavior and you've had time to work on it and start figuring out a plan of action before it's to that point. But if it all of a sudden is at that point and there's a concern of safety, I think you have to call the police or get out of the house. The concern is if you get out of the house, that child has access to knives in the house, things in the house that they could hurt themselves with, and you need to make sure that child's safe too.
I think what the concern is, I know what my concern would be, is if I call the police and they come and they control the situation, are they going to arrest my stepchild? Are they going to put him behind bars?
And generally they won't. I work, again, in the mental health crisis unit, so it's a mental health emergency room, and they bring them to us all the time. Especially if you tell the police. First of all, there's two things. You ask for, in Indianapolis, I don't know about everywhere else what they're called, but we have what's called CIT officers, critical incident officers, who have had mental health training. They come and shadow us. They know about some basic, like how we work, what we do with people. So they've kind of watched and they've gone through some mental health training just in a classroom. So you can ask for a CIT officer, or where everybody's at, you might want to call the police and see what it's called there. Because I'm pretty confident most places are doing that now, because mental health has had a lot of awareness going on. So that would be the start. And then when they get there, you want to let them know that they have a mental health condition and you would like them taken to whatever hospital is. Generally, they'll take them to the closest hospital. But whatever hospital you guys get your services through is where you would want to recommend they take them, so that hospital knows their history.
Is that only if you say, I would like them taken? Like, what if they de-escalate the situation? Can you just say, thank you for helping us, goodbye?
Yes, and they will frequently do that. They will go out and talk to you. So a lot of the kiddos we've seen, the police have been called out 3 or 4 times in a day, and the police finally say, okay, we need to take you in because this isn't working. But they will frequently come out, sit and talk with the kid, kind of assess where they're at, see if there's really any concerns. They have to determine if there's any concerns of safety. If there is concerns of safety, they have to bring them in for an evaluation, and sometimes they'll place them on a hold to do that, up to 24-hour hold, to bring them in if the parents don't able to or don't feel that it's that concerning. The police do have a responsibility to do that.
Okay, so even if they maybe haven't been diagnosed with anything, but they've been acting out, would you still follow this procedure?
I would, yes. Because if they're getting escalated to that point, there is something going on.
Yeah, that's
them the help they need.
And ultimately, like you said earlier, the situation is what it is. And if they're being violent and you're scared for their safety, your safety, or somebody else's, you need to get it under control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is awesome for me to know. I did not know any of that about, I'm like everybody else. You call the police, they come and they put handcuffs on the person that's being bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take them away. So I think that will be great knowledge. I'm going to call my local police department and see kind of what they do with that situation. So we were talking before we started the interview. Yesterday, I was involved in a school function, which was called Challenge Day, and it was awesome. And it was for kids, it was a couple hundred kids, and they came in and so it was a company that came in and talked about, bullying, depression, drugs and alcohol, and the fact that you have control over your life, and that you can pretty much guarantee things are going to happen. Your life is not going to be a continuous one-way road to blessings and a great life. You're going to have challenges. So how do you deal with those? What support systems do you have? And how can you be a leader in your community? So I was talking to one of the counselors about it. One thing that struck me was the fact that parents and other people in the community were concerned that if we brought the issues up, it would cause problems. And I'm the exact opposite. So like I was telling you, I talk all the time to my daughters about stuff, the what ifs, the the bad, the good, you know, everything. I'm not scared to talk to them about things. And those kids, there was crying going on, there was anger going on, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if we didn't have this day today, these kids would have gone through their school day like any other day, right? But they have some real challenges going on, to the point where if we started talking to them about their life for 2 minutes, it took 2 minutes, and they start crying or, you know, wanting to talk to somebody about it, that's huge. These kids have a lot going on in their lives. Can you talk to us about that? Like, if you give a child the room to talk about what's going on in their life and the stresses in their lives, and they become emotional or angry, or they might cry, is that a good thing? Or is that something that we're introducing, you know, a whole can of worms that we shouldn't be doing?
That is a great question, because I have so many parents. So I'm going to start by saying parents, stepmoms or dads or whoever, stepmom included in this, because I have talked to so many parents who say that they listen to their child. And then I ask the child, and the child says, no, you lecture me, you tell me what to do, but you don't really listen to me. And so my experience is kids don't feel listened to. And if they don't feel listened to, they're probably not going to tell you what's really going on. So as a stepmom, opening up the conversation of what comes up to be talked about, not having taboo or topics that we can't talk about in our house. So allowing the kids to speak and not shutting them down. I have heard parents say, I can't ask them because it might give them the idea. When parents will call into our crisis unit, they'll say, I'll be like, you know, they're out of control or acting up, and I'm like, is there any concerns of safety? Well, I don't know. Okay, can you ask them, are they thinking about harming themselves or killing themselves? And parents a lot of times will say, I don't want to, because that might give them the idea. You are not giving your child the idea. They have heard about it, they know about it, they've thought about it probably. So there is a big difference between thinking about hurting yourself and then actually having a plan. And so I'll get to that in a minute. But you are not going to give a child an idea if you ask them. If they've either already had it, or that's not going to make them decide that's what they want to do. You're not going to influence them to want to kill themselves by asking them. So parents, stepmoms, please ask your children, do you think about killing yourself? Now here is the difference. If I think about, I wish I wasn't here, or if I think about, I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up. Difference between I want to kill myself. Okay, so when you ask your kids, you want to be clear on what you're asking, because a lot of parents will get really freaked out because my child is suicidal, but all I said was, I wish I didn't have to deal with this tomorrow, and I want to go to sleep and not wake up. But they're not actually going to do anything to do that. So when you ask them, you want to be really clear on, do you just wish you didn't have to deal with this drama that's going on at school tomorrow, and you wish you could fall asleep and not wake up? Or do you think about, this is what I want to do to kill myself? Because I can't handle this emotion so much, I actually want to do what? And you want to know a plan. So you're asking them, do you think about actually ending your life? And if you do you think about ways you would do it?
Wow.
If they say yes, if they've thought about ways that they would do it, and they've thought about it recently, you need to take them to a mental health emergency room. If their therapist is available. And you want to check in kind of frequently, and that depends on your child. But if you asked them a year ago and you've not asked them since, something. Because kids aren't going to generally open up and say, hey, I'm thinking about ending my life. So they may text a friend that, but they're likely not to tell a stepmom or a mom or a dad. So it's, as a step parent or a parent, it's our job to check in with them and say, hey, I've noticed a change in your behavior lately. Is there something you want to talk about? Is there something going on we need to talk about? And start the conversation to lead into, do you think about hurting yourself? Okay, if you do you think about actually killing yourself? Hurting and killing aren't the same thing. If I want to hurt myself, it's a trend now for kids to cut. If I want to cut on myself, it is not the same thing as I want to end my life. So we need to be clear on which one it is. And it doesn't make cutting okay. Cutting isn't okay, but that's not the same thing as wanting to end my life.
So what if you have a friend of theirs that just texts you and says, hey, I just want you to know that your son or daughter just told me that they want to kill themselves. But then you go to them and you ask these questions and they say, no, I don't. I don't know why I said that.
So, and it depends on how good a relationship you have with with your child. Because we're talking about stepmoms here, and so stepmoms, I would say you don't want to take that risk ever to make that decision. You want to put it on the dad or the mom to make the decision whether they feel like there's risk, partly because you haven't known them as long probably, and partly because you're not legal guardian, and if you knew something and if something happened, you would have a hard time living with that. Any parent would, but you still don't want to take that on yourself as a stepmom. You want to let dad know or mom know, and then let them decide how they want to handle it. You can have input, but you want to put it on them because they're the legal guardian. And then they're the one that's going to have to actually take them into a crisis unit or wherever they need to go. Tell me your question again.
Okay, so no, that was part of my question. But what if a friend says, hey, your daughter or son has been telling me and texting me that they want to kill themselves and I'm worried about them? But then you go to your daughter's room and they say, they're saying, go ahead.
Sorry. I would say you need to take them to a crisis unit. And here's why. As parents, or even step-parents, we want to believe our child would never hurt themselves. So, and this is what someone did to me in college. Took a piece of paper and put it right in front of my face and said, read it. And I said, I can't. And the point is, when we're too close to the situation, we can't see it clearly. So we're never going to want to believe that our child would hurt themselves, and we may miss things that a professional could see. So for example, a lot of times kids will kind of hesitate. As a parent, we might miss that hesitation. As a therapist who's been doing this in this crisis unit for 15 years, I'm going to say, you hesitated. That concerns me. What does that mean? And they're likely to tell me as a therapist something that they wouldn't tell parents.
Okay.
I get out of them that they've been thinking about it, but they don't think they would actually act, but they've actually thought about it or looked it up. So I would say you need to take them to a professional, for a professional to make that assessment.
Okay. And you had touched on my next question, which as a stepmom, if you have a relationship with your stepchild where they tell you that they feel like they want to do this, they have a plan, then you need to talk to their father and their mother and help them make that decision. Obviously, if it's an emergency situation and you feel like they are in danger, imminent danger, then you can call, like we said, call the police, or you can, I'm sure if you took them into the hospital or whatever and said, I'm the stepmom, but I'm very concerned, they're not going to turn you away. They might just say, well, how do we get a hold of mom or dad? We need to get a hold of mom or dad. So I know as a nurse, we wouldn't say, well, you're the stepmom, so we can't treat them, so you need to leave. They would not turn you away.
So and this is a really kind of sticky but important point, because a step parent can't agree for an assessment in mental health. Like, they just cannot. And I know if you went to emergency room, that may be a little different because it's medical, but in mental health, a step parent we are very strict on that. And so if you have this child's immediate danger, what we would say in our office is you need to call 911 and have the police bring them in, because they put them on a hold, and that hold says we have to see them before they can be released. So we have to keep them there until we get a hold of a parent to do an assessment. If the parent brings them in, we can't detain the child. We have no right to keep the child there against their will. And a step parent can't sign them in for an assessment. So it puts it in a So what we do is call a triage, and we ask, are you suicidal? Are you homicidal? Have you done anything to hurt yourself in the last 24 hours? And just establish safety and go, because we don't have a parent we can get a hold of to give consent for an assessment. So if you call the police and ask them to put them on a 24-hour hold, then that allows us to do an assessment, and we have to keep them until we've completed that.
Okay, that's great information. Okay. So you guys are going to do what you think you need to do to keep everyone safe and make sure you're not sending someone home that is going to hurt themselves, or, you can't always be 100% sure. I understand that too, but that helps for stepmoms, because even though you might not have legal rights, you still have the right to protect yourself, to protect those around you, to protect your stepchild. And there are supports out there, and you're not alone. I really wanted to get that across to stepmoms.
Now, and we can just touch lightly on it, and if people have additional questions, want additional information later, we can look into that. But something to think about as a stepmom is, since you are with this child a lot that you don't legally have rights on, you might want to start looking at, with all my kids that I worked with in our youth day therapy program, is we set up a safety plan. And we set up, when you feel like you can't be safe, you're going to say this, text me this, do this, so I know. And it has to be, we usually did words, like a safety word that said, so one kiddo, she wanted to use her dog. And I'm like, no, it has to be something that parents know right away to drop what they're doing because you're having thoughts of self-harm. So we set up a safety word that said, I'm not feeling safe right now. And then a safety word that said, okay, now I feel safe, and you can leave me alone now. And then in that, we also made an agreement that no matter what hour, because I had a lot of kids that would self-harm, and it would be in the middle of the night, because nights are hard for a lot of kids with depression. And they would say, but I didn't want to wake my parent. And in the meetings that we had, the parents were like, of course, you can always wake me. But the kids didn't want to. So we made a deal that those words were 2 o'clock in the morning. It didn't matter. You could use those words anytime. And the parent would get up, and we had an activity they would do together. Like one family, it was they would watch a movie together. One family, it was chips and salsa. Another family was like chips and cottage cheese. And they would go get it, and they would sit and eat that together, safe again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So something like that, where step parents can feel like they have a little more control over, how do I help this child out that I'm responsible for, but I can't go and be involved necessarily in all that, the therapies and things like that.
That's great information. Okay. Yeah, we talked about before we started taping that there's so much to talk about. So you have graciously decided that you're going to do something for the viewers. What is it that you're offering them?
I am offering a free up to an hour session, coaching session, to just kind of, so people who want to experience coaching, first of all, because coaching is something that's really hard to explain. It's something you kind of need to experience to really understand it. So I'm offering a 1 hour, up to 1 hour free coaching session. It'll be through Skype or Vibe or phone. That's your choice. And so anybody who's listening, if they want to connect with me, you can connect through Powerful Questions Coaching, my website, and then it has the ability to email on there, and then it also has my phone number on there. And you can also call me at, it's on my website, and we can set up and actually you can text through that phone too, and we can set up who's interested.
Okay, because there's so many still, I feel almost like I'm leaving a lot of questions open here, because there's so much in this realm of being a stepmom that is unknown. And when you Google this, that's what people do. They Google it. There's not a lot of information out there. So I wanted to touch a little bit on this in this interview on the stepmom herself and taking care of herself, because that's my ultimate goal in what I do with stepmoms. But also the situation of keeping yourself safe and taking care of yourself. But on the other hand, what if it's your stepchild that is having some kind of symptoms or mental illness? What are some of the things that you can do, and some of the symptoms that you can address, and some of the support things out there? So I think we talked a lot about a lot of different things. I think it is a great way to open up opportunity to think about this more, to ask more questions. And I think the fact that you're gonna give them an hour to ask their specific questions is wonderful, because like we said, it's so individual. Every situation is so individual. It's hard to talk. Is it hard to talk about this on an overall basis, as far as, well, for depression you do this, for anxiety you do this? I'm sure you get asked a lot of questions, but yeah. So it's what? I'm sorry.
It is so individual. It's so, and anxiety so much that way. Is that, one thing, something that works for one person may not work for another. So it is kind of figuring out, what does depression look like in this kiddo, but it doesn't look the same in this kiddo necessarily. And personality plays a lot into that. I used to have moms who would say, my kid doesn't like kids, what's wrong? And it's like, well, that kid may just be an introvert and like to be home and wants just a few friends. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but it can look like depression sometimes to parents too. So
yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, and so you had touched on the fact that there's situational depression, and do you treat that? Do you not treat that? That's all individual too. And so I think this has opened up a lot of good discussion points and questions. I think you probably might get a lot of calls. I'm also going to continue my series, but I appreciate you so much coming and talking with us, giving us an overall idea of what we need to start thinking about. It's hard to find people like you, to be honest, and someone that is so open and transparent to talk about it. So I appreciate it. And so stepmoms, just at least go to her website, take a look at it. It's got some information on it. And I know she is continually putting more information on there. Go ahead and give her a call or text her just to see if, you might want to have a discussion with her. She can help you work through a lot of things that may be questions in your mind. So thank you, Diane. Have a wonderful day. And I will be posting all your information with this video. And maybe there might be some more interviews with you that we need to do, if you're up to it. So we'll talk about that.
I would love to.
I know. I might be like the next 10 interviews will be me and you. So, but okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. What is the number? Oh, wow, we went way over. Hey. I just talked to you. I thought it went pretty smooth. How about you? Okay.